Hello, Internet. My name is Ryan Ingram, and this is the Friday morning live stream where I answer any of the questions that you might have about real estate investing or I guess anything else financial, really. So this is this is set in my schedule every Friday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So anytime you come across any of the content, anytime you think to yourself, hey, I've got a question and I would like for Ryan Ingram to answer it, then I'm more than happy to do so. Pretty much at this time, this is something that I fight really hard to always stay a priority in my time, keep it on my calendar every week, and I do my best to never deviate from it. If I get sick or something in my family happens or comes up, that's pretty much the only reason that this live stream won't take place. So, I get a lot of requests in comments on some of the social media. I get a lot of direct messages that are asking about mentorship or some type of coaching call or anything like that. And this is truly the time that I have set aside for that. So every Friday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I am happy to answer any questions on here. And I take a lot of pleasure in doing so. So this is always one of the highlights of my week. I'm always really excited to do it, and I'm always really looking forward to it. So anytime you find yourself thinking that you would love to be mentored by me, then this is the time set aside for that. So I'd love for anyone interested in having questions answered to join us on this call and ask some questions. So unfortunately, the one-on-one stuff is not in my repertoire. I don't have the ability to coach people on an individual basis. So I think if I were to attempt to take that on, then I wouldn't have any time left to run a business or a couple different businesses. So it is with a lot of gratitude that I approach these calls or these live streams, and I really look forward to speaking with everyone. And I'm thankful for all the people that show up whenever they show up. So any questions you might have, go ahead and post your questions to the chat. This is a disclaimer saying that any advice you get here on this live stream should be run by some legal counsel. Any of the fields that we may talk about, if it's accounting, then you're definitely going to want to talk to a CPA. If it's anything legal, then you're definitely going to want to talk about this with an attorney that specializes in whatever it is that we're talking about. If it is anything real estate related in your local market, you should be talking to loan officers, realtors, other real estate investors in your market. So I'll do my best to answer all of these questions in really big, broad strokes, but for specifics for anything before you take action, always be sure to get the appropriate advice. What do you think about seller financing? I think seller financing is a fantastic tool to get started. I think that seller financing is a creative way that people that might not have money at the moment can get into real estate investing. I think it's a way to keep some of the money that you would otherwise spend on a down payment in some of your reserves. The cool thing about seller financing that I really appreciate is the terms ultimately are whatever you and the seller agree are mutually beneficial. So any terms that you guys can come up with, you can put into action. So it's not like working with a traditional lender or a hard money lender where they have their set terms and this is what they have to do, right? So I was speaking with a guy this past week who is in the mastermind group, and he just negotiated seller financing with someone. The loan is amortized over 10 years. There is a 3-year balloon payment, and the interest on the seller financing is 2.5%. That's 2.5%. So these are terms that I wouldn't have thought of. These are terms that I don't think I ever would have asked for, which kind of highlights the beauty that is seller financing, in that the seller agreed to it, the buyer agreed to it, and now that's what they're doing. So that is on a 3-unit apartment building, which is a good sized building. It's going to cash flow even at those terms. So anything that cash flows when it's amortized over 10 years is a huge win. So I think kind of where we are currently and the way that we are building our business, I think we have a couple portfolios that are seller financed, and we find those to be beneficial. But doing kind of one-off deals on a house here and there, for us, it is easier to use an existing private lender or traditional lender and buy that property outright. However, if it's a package, it may make sense. And there is a multitude of different circumstances that could arise that seller financing makes sense. So anytime you have the ability to do it, I think you would, so long as both parties agree that the terms are mutually beneficial and advantageous. So when we first got started, I would say for the first 40, 50 properties that we purchased, anytime I was dealing directly with the seller, it was always one of the things that I asked whenever I felt like I had enough rapport with the individual. I would see if they were interested in seller financing, and if they were, then we would try to pinpoint some type of terms that would be beneficial. So during our first year of buying properties, well, I guess our second, we had we went from, so we started the year with 2 properties. We ended with 21 properties. And of those, there were 15 of those that were seller financed. So 6 of them we got traditional financing on, and about 15 were seller financed. So I highly recommend it. I think it's a great way to get started. Because whenever you first, also another hurdle that you have to overcome during the first 2 years is most banks are going to want to look at real estate investing as like starting a new business or going out on a new venture. So the banks are going to want to see at least 2 years of real estate investing on your tax returns before they feel comfortable counting that rental income as actual income. So during those first 2 years, when you can only qualify for properties based on your personal income, you're not able to count the rental income, then you're in a really tough spot where it's pretty difficult to get traditional financing. So especially during those years, I would say seller financing, if you can negotiate it, is a fantastic option. The house I was trying to buy needs work. My bank won't finance the house. Yeah, banks do not like financing any home that needs work. If it is not immediately occupiable, then chances are a bank will not want to lend against it, which makes perfect sense from the bank's perspective, but it puts investors in a tight spot, especially if you are just getting started. So I think if you are attempting to buy a property that needs work, the ways that you could possibly do it are cash, seller financing, hard money, or private lending. So seller financing is the one you referenced. If this seller isn't interested in doing that for you, if it turns out, then the other 3 options are about the same: hard money and private money. Hard money and private money are very close to being the same thing. However, I think the key difference is hard money. They're going to charge you points. It's going to have more of a company style feel. They're going to want to do their own due diligence. They're going to have you maybe even do some appraisals, some inspections, perhaps. They're going to want to look over it. They're going to do their own due diligence as far as the after repair value, the purchase price. They're going to analyze it themselves, figure out how much rehab it needs, because in the event that you do not come up, or if you default or don't do the things that you say that you'll do, then the hard money lender, they're going to need to step in and either finish the work or find another investor to kind of pick up where you left off. So I think for that, it is going to be a little bit more expensive. They're going to charge you points. So, I've heard as high as, 5 points being charged. So if you're borrowing 100,000, you might have to pay $5,000 just to have the ability to use that hard money loan. Private money, I would say this is somebody that you personally know. This is a friend or family member. Their money is still going to be secured on the first position mortgage, but they're not necessarily going to ask for all of the documentation that the hard money lender would. They're going to be mainly concerned with the relationship that you two have, and they're going to just inherently trust you to do all of the right things. And in the event that you don't, there is that first position mortgage where they get the property. However, most private lenders are not interested in taking possession of that property in the event that you default. So that's the only separation. It's a small one that I have between hard money and private money. And then, of course, there's the option of you doing it in your cash. So if that is not an option for you, if you don't have enough money to do the purchase price and also fund the rehab costs, and when I say cash, I don't necessarily just mean money sitting in your account ready to be deployed solely for this purpose. I'm including, like, let's say you had the purchase price, but you did not have the money to rehab it. If you had a line of credit or a credit card and you were able to do the rehab or buy the materials utilizing those funds, then I am also including that under this categorization that I just kind of made up in my head of cash. So I think those are the options for you as soon as banks are out of the picture. Each of those have their own pros and cons. If you are using your own money or private lending, then I would say the timelines are a little bit more flexible. I know when we work with kind of hard money or hard money lenders, there's generally a pretty short timeline associated with it. So we've got one lender who is only interested in 6-month loans. I think he gives us an option to extend to like 8 or 9 months if necessary. But for the most part, it's 6 months. That's a really tight timeline, and it really requires you to hone in, focus, and make sure that everything goes right. So that, I would say, is one of the drawbacks, along with just hard money being very expensive. Does real estate investing work the same way for every country? I don't know. Probably not, I would say, because it doesn't even work the same in this country throughout the country. I would say real estate investing is one of those cool things that's extraordinarily localized. I think it's going to be a very long time before computers take over the real estate investing market. There's just such a vast opportunity to lose a significant amount of money when you try to make blanket moves across different regions in real estate investing. The formula that I use to buy properties here in Ohio works in this county. I don't know if it would work statewide, and it definitely won't work in a place like New York or California. So I would be leery of anyone that speaks broadly about real estate as it affects the entire nation. And I would probably speak even more strongly on people that try to put investing in different countries on the same plane in real estate. Now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, I don't even think I can formulate any opinions about any other countries and what it's like to buy real estate there. Well, congrats, Daniel Delgado. You made me feel like my world is very small, but I'm having a lot of fun in this tiny, small world of mine. What makes the difference between short and long rental? Short-term rentals are things like Airbnbs, properties that you have the ability to rent out for 1 night, 3 nights, a week, 3 weeks. And generally long-term rentals are going to be things that are on, 1-2 year leases. So short-term rentals are kind of, I would say, fairly new, not in the vacation space like the VRBO, but definitely, cities that aren't necessarily tourist attractions getting short-term rentals inside their city limits. I would say that's pretty recent. And, we have Airbnb to thank for that. Can you do creative financing when a seller has a seller's agent? Yes. I think I've seen this done. I don't think I have personally done this. Every time that I have negotiated seller financing, it's been when it's just the person that owns the property and I talking together. However, I believe that I have a couple people that I know that have purchased properties and gotten seller financing off the MLS. I think one of the only caveats to that is the seller's agent will need to get their commission probably at closing still. And for the most part, it's pretty well defined how much realtors are allowed to charge for their commission. So it's definitely something that you're going to be able to bake into your creative financing numbers. Seller financing is only an option if the home is paid off, correct? And would the seller be more interested in seller financing if you agreed to take on all repairs for the property? So, seller financing can be done if there's an underlying mortgage on the property. I would say seller financing, there are really two ways that I know of to do seller financing. The first way is for the seller to sell you the home. So the deed transfers to you, and then the seller would take out a first position mortgage secured by that property. That way, the property is already yours. So anybody that looks at the deed will see your name, not the previous owner's name. However, in the event that you stop paying on the financing to the terms that you agreed on, the seller that has that mortgage now is going to have to go through the same procedures that a bank would to foreclose that property and take ownership of it again. So they would have to foreclose on it. The second option available for seller financing is for that deed to remain in the seller's name. And then you do what's called a land contract, where you have the rights and privileges to that property, but it is not going to be, the deed won't transfer until the terms of that land contract are satisfied. And this is an area where I would definitely advise you to get an attorney involved, make sure this is done the right way. And if you are the seller and you are thinking about doing a land contract, I would make sure that you are very crystal clear on how to get that land contract off of the property in the event that that land contract does not work out. We recently attempted to purchase a property where it was still encumbered by a land contract, and the land contract, the person, the buyer on that land contract, the seller hadn't spoken to in multiple years. And because that land contract didn't work out, the seller of the property was under the impression that it just kind of went away and it was no longer an issue. However, at this point, we are not going to be able to purchase that property until that land contract is appropriately released from that, which is problematic, as the seller has no idea how to get a hold of the buyer that did so on land contract. So I'd be crystal clear on for both parties on what to do in the event that it doesn't work out, and also just to make sure that you're doing everything appropriately. Now, land contracts can be placed on top of existing mortgages. So in that case, the seller is just going to want to make sure that they have the ability to pay the existing mortgage and also still make a little bit of money over the mortgage. So if the underlying mortgage was for $500 a month, it wouldn't be problematic at all if the land contract was like $1,000 per month, right? That way the seller would still be making $500 per month and the mortgage would still be getting paid. So that's definitely a possibility. And as far as seller potentially being more agreeable if you took on all the repairs, I would say that is probably a fair assessment. But again, I think I would reiterate the fact that when it comes to seller financing, any terms that you two can agree to would be that are mutually beneficial are possible. So, I mean, I could see the seller wanting to be the one that makes all the repairs if they're in the line of business of making repairs and they want to see that property is repaired appropriately, that no, corners are cut or anything like that. Because at the end of the day, the seller, that property is their collateral. So I would kind of double down and say, as awesome as seller financing could be to someone that is in the process of building a portfolio, I would also kind of warn sellers away from it if it is already possible to just go ahead and sell the property in one transaction and not have any ties to it. I think for the most part, unless the seller is like a professional real estate investor or has multiple other properties and they're like really well versed in all things real estate, then the seller is the one that holds the majority of the exposure in the seller financing transaction, because they're kind of banking on you to make sure that you treat the property well, that you run the property appropriately, that you put people that will respect that property into the house to rent it from you. And in the event that that doesn't work out, if you put down a big down payment, that you might have that exposure, but for the most part, this property is the only collateral that the seller has. So in the event that let's say you make no repairs, you run it into the ground, you don't fix any of the things necessary on the property, you put someone that just tears up the property and does, $15,000, $20,000 worth of damage, which is really easy to do if you're a very negligent occupant. And you say, you know what, this is too much. I'm in over my head. I'm just going to walk away from this transaction. I'm going to default. The seller is now going to get this property back that you have effectively destroyed. So now the money that the seller collected from you for the down payment and those terms, once you default, they just have this horrible property that they now need to put 3 times more money into because you didn't run the property as the seller assumed that you would. So that is pretty much the only reason that I would say seller finance is not mutually beneficial. And that's one of the reasons that I would definitely say, even if offered seller financing on like one property, I'd be more tempted to get that seller out of the picture, just because I don't necessarily think that seller financing is always a win-win type scenario. I think the seller has significantly more risk and more exposure at stake than the buyer of that contract. Do you need to pay upfront or full price when buying a foreclosure? Yes. Some municipalities may only require a down payment and then give you maybe like a 14, 21 day window to go out, do some title search, make sure that the title is going to be clear on the property. Otherwise, after that is done, then you'll definitely need to come up with the rest of those funds for that foreclosure pretty quickly. So I would say for the most part, yes, but it's one of those questions that has a lot of asterisks at the end of it. There's a lot of different things that could make that not true, but I would say by and large, you're definitely going to have to come up with a full purchase price or whatever the winning bid was on that property in short order. I think the ones that I've won where it was truly an auction, like at a sheriff's sale, then we put down like a $5,000 deposit, and then as soon as all the title work was done, we had to bring the full remaining balance. So that's probably going to be the case in most municipalities, but everyone does it differently. I have heard, just in doing this YouTube channel and talking to other people about foreclosures in different places, I have heard that some municipalities, the moment you win the bid, that bill is due in full. So there's that. Have you ever done subject to, and how does it work? No, I have not. And I think that subject to deals are pretty well limited to, and this is, again, I could be totally ignorant on this and I might be speaking out of turn, but for the most part, when I think of subject to, I think of homeowners that may have gotten in over their head, that might be underwater on properties, um, or that may need to sell their property really quickly, and they are willing to keep that existing mortgage in place so long as they get out of from under the financial burden that is their monthly mortgage payment. So subject to, again, from my understanding, is you purchasing the property, having that mortgage stay in place, and you agreeing to continue to pay the mortgage, and then get all the rights and privileges to that property. Now, just like I said, the seller is holding most of the exposure on the seller financing contract. I would say the same for that subject to, because in the event that you stop paying that mortgage, the bank is not going to come after you, the new owner of the property. They're going to come after the person who originally took after that mortgage. So for that reason alone, I prefer not to mess with subject to deals. I would rather just purchase them and free that person from the entire mortgage. Just pay that off at closing, and keep it moving. That way, the seller's never looking over their shoulder, hoping that you are appropriately paying their mortgage. I've seen people do it. I've written the insurance policies on a couple of different subject to deals. But by and large, I think that if you do not approach subject to financing with the highest ethical standards, then you've got the ability to run a pretty predatory business model really quickly. And while there might be a lot of equity to immediately get there, I don't necessarily think that it's the most honorable or upright way to do it. I know that there are guys on the internet that make entire businesses on selling courses on how to do subject to deals. So I'm by no means making any allegations to them of being, of predatory practices. But here, from a functional perspective, each time I have seen the opportunity to do a subject to deal, it always made more sense just to pay for the property, get hard money or private lending, and get that seller completely out of the picture, completely unencumbered from that mortgage they have, and keep it moving. Can you do a high-level overview on how you generate leads? Sure. So I'm not a wholesaler. I do not currently do any active, like, direct mail, text message blasting, or anything to on scale generate leads. I know a decent amount of wholesalers. Each time I drive by a property that I'm interested in, I've got a handful of wholesalers that I will give that address to and tell them that I'm interested in purchasing this property, and let me know what they come up with. And then they'll do all, like, the back end work on finding that deal. I know a lot of people that do text message blasting and direct mail, and I'm one of the people that they ultimately sell that property or wholesale that property to. So I would say that my personal lead generation mainly comes from networking with wholesalers or realtors. I don't do or make any attempt to network with the actual sellers at the moment, or even find those sellers. So I think that's something that if I had, more time, then that's definitely something that I'd be interested in. I think it would be very prudent, as very specific of a business model as I have. And since I can, draw a circle around the areas that I'm interested in purchasing properties in on the map, I think it only makes sense for us to do some of our own lead generation. However, even though that has been my intentions, I have not actually followed through with taking any action on coming anywhere closer to doing that. So all of the times that I have purchased properties directly from the seller, it either comes from word of mouth. Contractors that we work with very regularly will have the owners of neighboring properties come over and say, "Hey, I'd be interested in selling my property too, if the guy that bought this one would be interested." So we've gotten several deals from that. Just word of mouth. I do my very best to, in most of the conversations that I'm in, mention that I am always interested in purchasing real estate if that person ever comes across anything for sale. And just from constantly putting that out there and constantly talking about that, my love for real estate, my interest in it, and all that, we've gotten a decent number of deals that way as well. Each time I meet a realtor, I give them, kind of my buy box or my buying criteria, and let them know that anytime they ever come across anything that falls inside of that, to let me know, and I'm more than interested in buying it. I own an insurance agency that pretty much only writes insurance for other real estate investors. And some people, in that, I've got some clients that, do a lot of flipping. So they will, I've purchased properties from them that they don't have the capacity to flip, or ones that didn't turn out as well as they thought, and they're not going to sell them as retail. We'd buy them and make the last repairs of that. I've also purchased several packages from out-of-state investors that just kind of get tired of this area and the difficulties that this market brings. So for the most part, I would kind of summarize my lead generation as word of mouth, as networking with wholesalers, networking with realtors, kind of being in the business a little bit with that insurance agency. And then just constantly, being on the lookout, having conversations about real estate investing. And currently we're buying one property that is on the street that I live on. And it's because, every time I'm talking to one of my neighbors, I always somehow give up a soft pitch of, "Hey, if you're ever interested in selling your house, let me know. I'd be happy to look at it." So, not in an annoying way. I'm not a salesman to my neighbors, but definitely don't want that to go unsaid either. Yeah, absolutely. Looking to purchase a 6-unit property. Most banks are doing up to 4. How hard is it to lock in a 6 or more unit loan? Also, is it considered commercial? Yes. So it's not going to be hard at all for you to. I think, sometimes banks aren't necessarily known for thinking outside of the box. And if you call into a bank and use the wrong words, then you're going to get the wrong answer. Right. So I think knowing what it is that you're asking for is half the battle with these banks. And you're correct. 1 to 4 units is residential. So if you've got a 4-unit property, you can get a normal home loan on it. If you, want a fantastic strategy of purchasing homes is buying a 4-unit, living in one of the units. That way you're qualified for a normal homeowner loan and you get the rental income from the other 3 units. So I think that is something that pretty much all first-time home buyers should do, because you pretty much get to live for free while you are collecting, the rents of 3 units. And usually, just because the quantity of 4 units, the expenses that you're going to incur in owning that property are never going to be as great as the rent you are collecting from the other 3. So it's a fantastic strategy that everyone should consider, especially when they're younger, before they have big families that might not be appreciative of living inside of a 4-unit. So do that strategy if you're able to, because 1 to 4 unit is considered a residential kind of normal homeowner loan. So anything that's true for buying a single family house for you and your family to live in would also be true for buying a duplex, a 3-unit, and a 4-unit. However, as soon as you cross that 4 threshold, As soon as you start venturing into the 5 unit and greater, you're now in the commercial loan space. So, what I imagine, and from just hearing the frustrations of trying to get banks to finance things or give you, quotes on, what a loan package would look like, um, multiple times people with like a 5 or 6 unit under contract are calling the Fannie Freddie lenders that pretty much only do residential mortgages, and they're asking for this commercial loan and not getting a good explanation as to why they can't do it or what they should do next in order to actually get a loan on that property. So if you are buying a property that's 5 units or more, you need to only talk to commercial lenders. Now, I would say, as far as commercial lenders go, this is when the area starts getting really gray, right? So, when you're talking about 1 to 4 units, you're talking about most banks packaging loans to Fannie Freddie. Fannie Freddie, they have really tight guidelines. Uh, they spit out some really cookie cutter products. So, you talk to 20 different banks that plan on selling the loan to Fannie Freddie after the loan gets originated. You're talking about 20 different banks that are going to go through the exact same line of questioning, have the exact same product, and maybe they might have a little bit of a rate change or rate difference between them, but for the most part, it's going to be the exact same product. That is not true on the commercial space. The handcuffs come off. It really becomes up to the local bank. And one of my favorite things to say is, he who has the gold makes the rules. So when it comes to commercial loans, a lot of, especially your regional or local banks, are going to keep these in their portfolio. They're never going to attempt to resell them. So it's really up to them what they're comfortable with and what they're willing to lend money on and what they aren't. So you call 10 different banks about a commercial loan and you could get 10 different requirements, 10 different answers. So, seasoning is one of those things that I think is most evident how this changes. So, some banks want 18 months seasoning. So they want you to own the property for 18 months before they will do some type of cash out refinance. Other banks will do 6 months. And then some banks don't have any seasoning requirements. So that, I think, exemplifies what I'm saying. When local banks, credit unions, they kind of get to make their own rules. Regional banks do. Now, as soon as you start getting into the larger banks, they're going to have that same kind of cookie cutter approach to their line of questioning, what they are interested in doing, what they aren't, just because they're trying to scale these loans. They have their own appetite. They've created, packages and loan products for specific types of businesses, packaged in certain ways where they're able to mitigate their risk. So I would not recommend going out to a large bank like Bank of America and asking for a commercial loan, on a 6 unit property. So I would hone in on regional banks. Pretty much the smaller, the better. I would say, if you can call a bank and ask and ask about this commercial loan, and then you get transferred to the vice president, the VP of commercial lending, then you're probably in the right spot. So anytime you're like one phone call away from the vice president of commercial lending, I think you're in the right spot. I think you should try to find 4 or 5 of those type of banks and figure out who's going to offer you the best product between those 4. Now, one thing that I also see a lot of people do wrong is, once you make the appropriate connections with these banks, then if they turn you down, figure out why they're going to turn you down. Because the chances are, if you buy this 1 6 unit and it goes well, you're not going to stop there. You're going to want to buy another 6 unit. And, one of the things that we kind of honed into early on is, different banks like to see financials presented to them in different ways. They like, you really are able to hone in and learn on like what is important to a bank. So at this point, we might have 15, 20 banks that we work with, and we have a very good understanding of their appetite, how they like to see things presented. So when we find a deal that might be a good fit for that lender, we already know how to package it and present it to them for consideration and approval. So I would recommend that you take notes, that you figure out what banks are looking for, what they like to see, what they want to lend on. And then you, as someone that would love to utilize their funds, go out and find deals that would fit into their appetite really well. So I think a lot of investors, they get their picture of what real estate investing looks like in their head, and then they try to, shove these, square real estate deals into the round hole of the lender, and it just doesn't work well, or whatever that saying is that I probably just botched. So if possible, it's always better to figure out what the banks want and adjust your business model accordingly, while still investing in real estate. I would say that's the winning strategy, because if you go out and you have this one deal that you find that you think is great, and you want to find hundreds of those, but there's no bank that's willing to lend to you on those types of deals, well, you're in for a very strong uphill battle. However, if you figure out what banks want, what they like to lend on, and then go out and find deals that they like, well, you're never going to have any trouble finding financing for those deals that one bank likes, until they reach their threshold of how much money they can give you at one time. What expenses do you calculate when underwriting a deal, and how do you calculate those expenses? Well, funny you ask. There's this awesome little calculator called the Ingram rental calculator, which is available for free in the app store of your choice, whether that's the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. So you can download that app and you can punch in numbers just like I would. For the most part, I would say that the creation of this app was caused by two things. You know what? I'm going to make that three things. The first thing is that I really wanted to figure out a way to give you all YouTube viewers something for free. And under no circumstances is it any data collection, is it any data monitoring, and there's nothing. There's no paywalls. There's no hidden in-app purchases or anything like that. The only thing that I do is there's a little banner at the bottom of the app that has like 3 or 4 things on it that would cause me to make money if you clicked on any of those things and did it. I think it's a free trial to PropStream, 7-day free trial. And then if you use that software, you like it, and you have it for 8 days or more, then you're going to get charged a monthly fee. And some of that will come my way. I'm very appreciative. I think everybody should use PropStream. The second thing is the mastermind. So I have a mastermind that I do. There are 2 groups currently. There are usually about 10 people in each group, and we meet for 1 hour a week. Each week there are 2 different men in the middle, where they come up with any sort of problem they're having, either professionally or personally, and everybody gives feedback on that issue. We also are currently doing a study where we are reading books written by billionaires and watching interviews with billionaires, and we kind of brainstorm pretty quickly on what some key takeaways of those words or of those interviews were, and how we can apply those to our real estate investing business or our business on the local perspective. So it's a lot of fun. If you are a guy that really wants to be around like-minded people, I would say that this is definitely something that you should check out or consider. And then the last thing I think I advertise is a list of books that I have read that have links to the books, like Amazon links to the books, that you can click on. And if you buy that book from that link there, then I'll get compensated a very small percentage of that from Amazon. So those are the only ways that I make money from this app. Everything else is completely just to be useful. So the expenses, pretty much, What you're going to want to do is you're going to line item out all of the income from that property and then line item out all of the expenses that you're going to have. Now, there are hard expenses that you're going to have on the property in a predictable manner, and then there are made up expenses. So the hard expenses would be things like your mortgage payment, the insurance, the taxes associated with that property. You're also going to have things like the utilities. If it's a multifamily that you're responsible for the utilities, you're going to have your property management fee, which I would include even if you are managing it yourself. And let's see, what other kind of fees are there? Pretty much think that's about it. And then you're going to have your made up fees that a lot of people tell you that you need to include for some reason, just to give like more conservative numbers or something. I really don't know. And that is your capital expenditures. So you're going to want to figure out how much money you're comfortable setting aside for the capital expenditure items to be replaced whenever they go bad. Things like roofs, HVAC systems, water heaters, driveways, things like that. You're going to have a repair maintenance budget where you think that you're going to be able to be comfortable setting aside a certain percentage for repairs and maintenance. Things like leaking faucets, clogged drains. Clogged drains, you should probably always reassess back to the person that clogged the drain. But things like that. Maybe a cabinet door falling off for some reason. And then you're going to have your vacancy, which is also kind of a made up thing. And I guess, the theory is if you set aside 4% for vacancy on a monthly basis, when it actually goes vacant for however long it takes you to fill that vacancy, you would be able to pay yourself from that vacancy reserve, maybe, so that you don't miss any cash flow. I really don't know. I don't like the made up stuff because it is unpredictable and usually wrong. So there's this one spreadsheet that I made. It's called the Capital Expenditures Calculator, or CapEx Calculator. And I went through and took the total overall price. So let's say a roof costs $10,000 and its life expectancy is 30 years. If you want to make sure that you have enough money to replace that roof 30 years from now when it goes bad, then you need to do 30 times 12, 360, $10,000 divided by 360, and put that money away for a new roof on a monthly basis, so that 10 years from now, you've got that money set aside already there for a new roof. You're going to want to repeat that process for everything that could possibly go wrong with that house: the hot water heater, the furnace, the driveway, the siding. And what you're going to find is you will very quickly come up with a number that is unrealistically high to set aside on a monthly basis in order to appropriately pay for, out of the cash flow, all of the things that are going to go wrong with that house. And ultimately, if you look at a house and investing in it, then you are pretty much going to rebuild that house every 70 or 80 years. That is when, the life expectancy of all of those things. During that time, you're going to pretty much have a new house every 70 or 80 years, and that's going to cost a lot to do. So similarly, I like to compare, analyzing and calculating and making cash flow profits off of real estate investing to writing the insurance on vehicles. So if you are familiar with how much you pay on a monthly basis for your auto insurance, then, imagine if your car was the only car that insurance company wrote the insurance on, right? All of the things that could potentially go wrong with your car that insurance company is providing coverage for, you can't possibly afford, and that company can't possibly charge enough to have enough money set aside for all of the things that could potentially go wrong, especially when you start considering the liability risk, like, a horrible scenario of, like, let's say you hitting, a bus or causing a bus to, full of, children or something. That would be horrific. So that would be a horrible claim that insurance company couldn't possibly cover from the premiums they charge you on your one vehicle. However, if an insurance company charged or wrote insurance on 10,000, 100,000 different vehicles, then statistically speaking, now you are messing with some really big numbers where even if something catastrophic does happen, it's not going to happen to all 10,000 or all 100,000 cars at once. So the cash flow from the premiums collected on a monthly basis from those 10,000 cars are going to have enough free cash flow associated with it for you to take care of any of the things that might go wrong with your car. And even more so on the liability aspect, because liability events are so rare from a very large statistical standpoint that usually on an insurance policy, the liability is one of the cheaper charges because it's so infrequent. It's easier to kind of do the actuarial and underwriting data for. So that is kind of how you should approach your real estate investing portfolio as well. Is if you're going to be very hard pressed to ever actually show any profit off one or two rental properties. So the kind of the threshold that I've always it's arbitrary, but kind of made up, is somebody that is interested in getting started in real estate investing should not be happy with anything less than 10 properties. For your first couple of years, you should be absolutely racing in a full out sprint to get to 10 properties as fast as possible. And I would even say, just 10 doors as fast as possible. And what you're going to notice whenever you get to those 10 doors is your cash flow is going to be sufficient from the other 9 to handle most of the things that could go wrong with any one of those units. So if you take moderately good care of your portfolio, then it's going to be very unlikely that you have like a maintenance order or a capital expenditure item that all of these properties are going to need inside the same month. So when my brother and I had fewer than 10 properties, we had a very painful conversation with each other at the end of every month, trying to figure out how much money we needed to each put into the business in order to keep the business alive to die another day, right? So when we passed that 10 threshold, which I said earlier on this call, we did on that second year, we went from, we started the year with 2 properties and we ended with 21. And we noticed that as soon as we were collecting the cash flow from all 21 of those doors, is we always had a sufficient amount of cash flow. If a new property needed a roof, we could pay for it from the cash flow from those other properties in the portfolio where rent was paid, but they had no issues. So from there, the conversations of how much money we needed to put into the business on a monthly basis in order to keep everything running smoothly, those became more and more spaced out to the point where they just never happened anymore. So that is all that I have on calculating rental property expenses and how I think you should do them. So that's my philosophy. So rather than putting these soft made up expenses into your analysis, I would say, I think the more appropriate thing to do, rather than setting aside money for, capital expenditures and repairs and maintenance on a monthly basis, is I would say an appropriate reserve for you to start out with is imagine that the 2 biggest ticket items needed to be replaced at the same time. So if you've got a property, if you're buying it and it has an older roof, go ahead, figure out how much that roof is going to cost and set aside that money for a roof. And then do that same thing with the second item. So if you know that the HVAC system is going to cost 15 grand to replace, when it's time to replace it, go ahead and set that money aside as well. And when you have enough in reserve to replace the 2 biggest capital expenditure items, then chances are you're going to be good on covering any of those costs whenever they arise, either capital expenditure or the repairs and maintenance. And then just make sure that you are adding to that on a monthly basis. So I think one of the things that kind of steers people astray is whenever they assume, because a book or a podcast or some other YouTuber told them that they would be safe and that they're going to be uber conservative in their analysis of a property if they are putting aside 10% for capital expenditures and 10% for repairs and maintenance on a monthly basis, then whenever anything happens, they're going to have enough set aside in order to do that. But I mean, if we play that out, let's say you have a property rented for $1,000 per month, right? So you're putting in 10% for CapEx, that's $100 per month, and you're putting in 10% for repairs and maintenance. So it's $200 per month is going aside for anything that property might arise, right? Well, from the insurance agency perspective, I've had a lot of new investors call me, 6 months in for them owning a property, trying to figure out if, some event that occurred, something that went wrong with that house is covered from insurance, like the plumbing. It's going to cost $4,000 to replace the plumbing. Well, if you, set aside $200 per month, you're not going to have that much money set aside to make those repairs 8 months from now. So starting with a healthy reserve and adding to it is a significantly better strategy than setting aside what you think is a conservative amount of money on a monthly basis, right? Because capital expenditures don't care. It's also not like you can pay your contractors the same way that you budget those funds, right? So it's not like you can give a contractor that comes in and does a roof for you. You can't give him $200 per month. So there's a lot of exposure there that you need to cover for by having that money on the front end as reserves. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you being on here. I haven't seen you on here before, so thanks for stopping by this morning and asking all these awesome questions. I really appreciate it. There's this old house on my street, hasn't been touched in 20 years, and it's dilapidated. Can I go have fun in there? You do whatever you want to, and accept willingly, without hesitation, any charges that may come from your fun festivities inside that dilapidated home. All right. Any questions that anyone has, feel free to post them in the chat. Got 12 people on. We've been doing this for about an hour. We currently have, we currently have 32 properties under contract. We've got a couple of offers out there that we're waiting to hear back on, but I am pretty pleased with the number of properties that we currently have under contract. Just because, I was asked the question earlier, and I think it's pretty fun to do. Let me go through and figure out where we got the majority of these deals from. So 16 of these are from wholesalers. So we've got 32 properties under contract. 16 of them are from wholesalers. So that's a solid 50%. There are 2 in here that are from word of mouth. Just that one is one on the street that I live on that I mentioned earlier. And the other one is one that a contractor sent our way. So then the other 14 are from the MLS. So 14 from the market, 16 from wholesalers, 2 from word of mouth. It's pretty cool. Yeah, man. Welcome back. I sure do appreciate it. I sure do appreciate it. I've had my beard for about 4 years, and I hope that you'll ask some relevant questions. Maybe one about real estate or something financial. Let's see. Buying multiplex versus a single family home to start renting out property. Single mom saving for an investment. Let's see here. I prefer single family homes, but that's a personal preference. One of the things that I like to say about investing in real estate is there are just as many different ways to make money investing in real estate as there are people investing in real estate. So there's no right or wrong. There is no uh, one way that from a long-term perspective is going to make you more than another. I think so long as you're not negligent and you're investing in real estate, the return on investment is going to be the return on investment. You're always going to have your appreciation. If you're using leverage, you're always going to have the principal pay down. And if you analyze properties for cash flow on the front end, then you're always going to have that cash flow. And you're also going to always have those tax benefits. So what type of real estate you invest in, I think matters very little. I would say what matters more than the type of real estate investment are the problems that you are interested in having. Because at the end of the day, your return on investment is going to be your return on investment. You're going to be able to calculate it. If you're making 20% in a multifamily and you're making 20% a year on a single family, then you're doing a fantastic job. And what becomes more important is the lifestyle or the problems that you have to deal with on a daily basis. Um, and those are what I think to be the real deciding factor in what type of real estate investing you get involved in. So I would say if you don't mind some interpersonal drama type stuff, if you don't mind taking complaints about somebody walking too loudly in the middle of the night, um, then multifamily might not be a bad idea. If you don't mind paying utilities, multifamily might not be a bad idea. Now, I'm saying all of this from somebody that just does not like multifamily, so I'm a little bit jaded. I'm sure you can come up with things that are equally frustrating on single family homes, but they generally lend themselves to have more types of problems than the one that I'm willing to deal with. So I would, if I were you, and I was trying to figure out what type of real estate I wanted to get involved in, I would go out and meet some local real estate investors, and I would purposefully try to find a handful that only invest in single families. I would try to find a handful in ones that only invest in multifamilies, and then hopefully there's some that have a mixture of the two. I would also try to find, some of the alternative, the ones that aren't necessarily residential, like some self storage unit people, maybe some like senior living, some group home style investment strategies. I think all of them you should explore, especially while you don't yet have any investments of your own. You're going to be able to kind of learn a little bit from a lot of people, figure out what their biggest struggles are, and then do kind of some sort of self-assessment and figure out if the type of struggles that they're having are ones that you're willing to have. Man, there's no comma in there. Let's see here. 20,000 credits, almost 700. I think the best credit score for interest rates is anything over 680. I've heard either 640 or 680. My brother would be able to answer this question really quickly, but 700 is fine. Close to 700 is fine. I think that makes you eligible for the best interest rates that are available from banking products. However, I would also say that generally speaking, the difference in the interest rates from a long-term perspective are not something that you should spend too much time thinking about, right? Um, if you qualify for better interest rates, great. But if the difference between you doing the deal and not doing the deal is like 1%, on an interest rate, I would still do the deal. Um, as you hold these assets for any length of time, eventually you're going to have the opportunity to refinance and hopefully get better rates or terms. And, interest rates only impact the cash flow portion of the deal. They're not going to impact the principal pay down. They're not going to impact the appreciation. They're not going to impact the amount of the tax benefits that you get. So I wouldn't sweat interest rates too much. I think I have been in conversations with other investors where they have spent entirely too much time uh, worried about interest rates. So it is not one of the things that I am uh, most concerned about when it comes to financing real estate. Good job on getting $20,000 saved up. That's a big deal. What are your thoughts on buying a course to learn how to get started in real estate investing? I wouldn't do it. We have not purchased any courses. Um, Everything that I know about real estate investing has come from free materials such as a YouTube channel like this, podcasts, networking with local real estate investors. I think getting a feel for what type of real estate investing you want to do is pretty easy to do with the internet and all the free information available to you. And then I think the rubber's really going to meet the road when you're getting out there and networking with local real estate investors. I think that's something that enough people or that people don't do enough of. So I would highly recommend that and build solid relationships with people that are investors in your area. Spend a great deal of time with them and really learn the local ropes from them. Because, like I said earlier on this live stream, every market is unique. What works here in Dayton might not work in Cleveland, and it definitely won't work in San Francisco or New York. So, uh, learning from someone local is going to be the best strategy. And I don't think that I know of anyone. I'm trying to think really quickly. I would say the 2 or 3 most successful real estate investors that I know, I never purchased a course. I know for sure that I'm never going to make a course and charge for it. I think, I'm a little bit biased, but I think these live stream setups, if people actually want to learn and are willing to show up pretty regularly, ask questions, I think you're going to end up ahead from purchasing a course. So, um, I think when I think about people that have done well with buying courses, it wasn't so much the course as the connections and the way they were able to build their network via purchasing those courses, but not the material in them. Because you got to think about it. I mean, real estate has been a real thing um, since people have been around and like needed a place to live, right? So there's nothing new about investing in real estate. Maybe there have been some modifications to the financial instruments used to acquire real estate with leverage, but the fundamentals of investing in real estate haven't changed at all. There are entire industries built around supporting, the real estate industry. So I would liken, real estate investing more of like the franchise model, where as soon as you become a real estate investor, you have all of the resources available to you, granted at a fee, but like a plumber can come in and fix anything as far as plumbing goes in that house. An electrician can come in and fix anything, right? You sit down and you talk to a bunch of seasoned real estate investors or loan officers, and you're going to get all the information that you need on utilizing banks to buy real estate investing. So it's such a old industry that there hasn't been any new information that has come out in a really long time. There's one book that I like a lot by Schwab. It's called Building Wealth One House at a Time. That book was written a pretty decent amount of time ago. And, everything in there is still very factual and very true. So no course, maybe some books, but no courses. What things shouldn't I have on my credit to buy property? I mean, people don't like seeing any types of collections, right? Um, I don't necessarily agree with the entire institution of credit. And I think if you are a real estate investor for any length of time, then your credit is going to be lower than the average person just because the number of inquiries and the utilization rates from some of this revolving stuff. But mainly the number of inquiries is always going to kind of weigh heavy because, an inquiry is done each time you even ask for some type of financial product to coincide with your real estate. So you're going to have a crazy number of inquiries after a while. And, creditors just want to make sure that you always pay your bills on time and that you don't have anything, actively in collections. So I would say that's the most important. And I would say for most banks, credit is really important because, derogatory marks are bad and creditors that are lending money don't want to lend money to people that have a history of not paying what they're supposed to. However, I would say that, your credit score is not it might kick you out of some loan programs immediately, but I don't know. I wouldn't put too much weight on that. I would rather put weight on, your financial statement. If you keep your financial statement strong, then your credit at some point will follow suit. It might take 7 years for some things to fall off, but you're not going to find yourself making mistakes regularly that are derogatory marks on your credit if you have a really strong personal financial statement. Do you think there will be a housing market crash? Are you, as a landlord, prepared? So I have no idea. I don't know if there's going to be a crash or not. I would say for the most part, real estate has always trended upwards. In those times where it hasn't, it was because of some sort of underlying manipulation of the financial instruments that went along with real estate, right? So in 2008, when there was that big housing crash, the global financial crisis, whatever you want to call it, there were a significant number of bad loans on the books. I don't see that right now. Things tightened up so much from a lending perspective as it pertains to real estate after 2008 that I'm pretty confident that there are very few bad loans on the books. I think the financial instruments that have kind of been played with for the real estate market are the things like, all the stimulus money and, all these programs out there willing to pay for people's rents right now. I think the eviction moratorium, the foreclosure moratorium, I think those things may have some impact at some point, but since they've never really been done before on a scale that they have recently, it would be really hard to predict anything based on those. So, I see the labor shortage, I see the material or supply shortage, and I see the housing shortage. So I'm hard pressed to come up with any type of potential scenario where those three things change anytime soon. So if it is harder to build a house, but yet still a need for more of them, if there are fewer people there to build homes, then all I see is the homes getting more scarce, and interest rates, all of that, they might limit the buying pool, but how small the buying pool doesn't matter if there's a disproportionately just such a deficit on the number of houses available. I've got some friends that think some type of correction is going to happen. I've got some others that don't think it's going to happen. So I don't know. I can see it both ways. I have some people that already say that in some places the inventory is shooting up, the days on market are lengthening. I know some other people that are saying that it's a buyer's market again, not a seller's market like it has been. But as far as on a day-to-day basis, the amount of changes that I've seen in real estate investing so far in this area haven't been few. They've been very few. So I think it's impossible to say. Like I mentioned earlier in this mastermind that we're doing, we're studying like some books written by billionaires and some interviews with billionaires. And Howard Marks he runs a fund, and he wrote a book called The Most Important Thing, and that book was written very shortly after the global financial crisis. So I find it to be really relevant for anybody that wants to explore this line of questioning. And one of the things that he said in that book that I really appreciate is there are two types of economic forecasters: those that don't know, and those that don't know they don't know. Right. So I think that's really important. I think that another one of his points is there are so many variables, there are so many possibilities and potential outcomes that it is unrealistic to possibly be right in your predictions, and you're going to be wrong significantly more than you will ever be right. And if you are right once, then you shouldn't fool yourself in thinking that you have some type of um, internal hunch that is going to be more right than not, or you're going to be right the next time as well. So be careful. I think regardless of what is or isn't happening, always having a healthy reserve is ideal. But I would also say if you own any business or you own any real estate portfolio, your total overall exposure is always going to be significantly higher than any reserve you're able to realistically carry, right? Because if you ever carry an appropriate reserve, then you're probably really seasoned in the industry already. You probably have a significant amount of resources. I'm thinking about Berkshire Hathaway right now, right, where they're sitting on a massive amount of cash, but they've been doing this for a very, very long time, and they were able to build that up. But also, if you take their total overall exposure and all of the things that could go wrong, and if you make them happen at the same time, then they don't nearly have the amount of capital that they should in order to truly be insulated. So I'm going to stand by my first statement without kind of altering it, and saying that you should always have a healthy reserve. But if you want to play this what if game and talk about things crashing and multiple bad things happening at once, then your reserve will never be large enough for you to feel comfortable to take on the world in a I am prepared moment. However, I think one thing that can insulate you more than your reserve is your own personal stick with itness, your own work ethic, your own ability to be agile, to pivot when needed, to change your business model with the changing economic market, to adapt and maneuver and continue to work hard and figure things out, and always be looking to provide additional value to the economy. So I think if you if you do that, then you're going to end up just fine through any of these kind of market seasons, right? And it's not uncommon for any of these multimillionaires or billionaires to have gone bankrupt, or to at least have lost everything, or have been on the cusp or brink of losing everything at some point in their career. But what ultimately brought all of them through it is their work ethic, their unwillingness to give up, their ability to pivot, their ability to adapt to the changing market and continue. So I think that's my overarching sentiment. Am I prepared? Yes. Um, And what we lack in reserves, we will make up for in determination, stick-witedness, and our quest to bring value to the marketplace. Good morning. When planning a renovation for a rental, what are your thoughts on making it slightly nicer than the competition to attract a stronger pool of tenants? Absolutely. Absolutely. This is something that you should do, riding on the riding on the coattails of my comments about always seeking to provide value, to the economy. I think this is one way that you could easily do it. And when you are, doing a renovation, what you're gonna notice is it takes a very small amount of money, and it takes just a little bit more work to churn out a significantly nicer product than what's on the market. It's not, I would say, I would say while it may be a money thing a little bit, bringing an above average product to the market is more of a character thing than it is a financial thing. Um, the landlords that I know that are okay with, really subpar turns and just getting someone in there, they pay for it. It costs them more in the long run because of their legal fees, because the amount of times they don't collect rent, you know, um, the amount of deferred maintenance that their properties accumulate, the the amount of money that they aren't able to sell their properties for whenever they get tired, right? There's always way below market because, the residents have really beat up the property, subpar. There's a lot of deferred maintenance present. So it's truly impossible, in my opinion, to win in the long term by bringing a subpar product to the market and by running a subpar business. You might get ahead in cash flow, but any sort of cash flow that you bring out by saving money in that way is strangling your business and hindering you from future profits along down the road. So yeah, absolutely. Go a little bit further than the last guy. Go a little bit further than the next guy. But what you're gonna quickly find once you start paying attention and looking around at what's available in the market is there's a lot of people out there acting like they're running businesses, and they are barely trying. And they are either barely trying or being negligent. So it's easy to try hard, and it's very easy to pay attention and not be negligent, which is exactly what you should do. You really motivate me. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's courses too. I love that book. I bought that book by Schwab. Great read. Absolutely. Dave Ramsey is saying no housing crash, yet Patrick Bet David, Valuetainment, is saying there will be a crash. Both backed their conclusions with data. And this is why like I mentioned, the mastermind, we're going over billionaires that have written books and we are listening to their interviews, right? Dave Ramsey, Patrick Bet David, this channel, right? Like, you are falsely incentivized to cover this topic ad nauseum because right now, every single person is typing this into the computer machine, trying to find an educated response. And these people that have large followings that may or may not be tuned into your local market, that actually have a pulse on what's really going on in your local market, are spitting out advice that they are blanketing across the entire nation. And, you can't do that. Dayton is significantly more depressed than most places in the nation. Consequently, our values on our properties are still, extraordinarily suppressed because we have yet to recover from large employers pulling out from, that magnified the impact that we had from 2008 when also, so you had mass exodus of population, and you had anybody that was willing to stay may or may not have been able to keep or maintain their mortgage. So it was a real double whammy for us back then. But now, because the values are so low, even if we had a massive correction, we're still going to be ahead from where we were, because our prices are not yet kind of overinflated like some other areas. So when you are trying to find the appropriate way to plan or act, I would venture to say that you are not going to find that type of advice anywhere on the main hits of the radio station, of YouTube, of anywhere where these people are rewarded with higher view counts for topics that they may or may not even be qualified to talk about, right? Obviously, Patrick Bet David and Dave Ramsey have both done extraordinarily well for themselves from a financial and net worth perspective. But does that mean that they're qualified to speak on the things that the algorithm is telling them to speak on? No, not at all. So be very careful on who you listen to, and always look for that really high track record in that specific thing that you're looking for an answer on, right? Dave Ramsey has real estate. Yes. Dave Ramsey, has some extraordinary experience in the personal finance sector. Yes. Does that make him an economist? No. But there are two types of people: those that don't know and those that don't know they don't know. So, I would venture to say that you could listen to 1,000 different predictions. They all be different from 1,000 different people, and none of them fold out in reality. So it's one of those things where, again, I think at the end of the day, you ought not worry about what the economy is doing, so long as you have an avenue of providing value in the way that you can, right? So if you're seeking to add value to the economy, if you're seeking to somehow improve the lives of people around you, and so long as people still have needs in whatever economic forecast that you feel most comfortable with, and the government is still allowing private citizens to fulfill the needs of these people that are still around, then you have an opportunity to excel from an entrepreneurial or economic perspective. And I think that is what you really need to bank on. So in the event that, the economy goes really sideways, there is still going to be opportunity for those willing to pay attention and work hard to excel. I'm in the middle of reading Warren Buffett's biography called Snowball. That's a really good book. His frugality and modest living has made him who he is right now. Have you read that book? I have read that book. And I think I would disagree. His frugality is, fun to look at and think about, right? And I think how frugal he is, and how modest he lives is, a pro in many ways. There's a lot of benefits to it. I would say it's more of a indication of some underlying character traits that have really allowed him to amplify in his personal life, or his business life rather, and how he looks at stocks, right? So, oftentimes people that are frugal and live modestly have this ability to disconnect from the, the way that other people view them, right? They're not going to be convinced to spend $50 just because everybody else is going out to eat or something, right? They're not going to be convinced so easily to have the nicest clothes because they want to be viewed highly by their peers, right? And I think you can transfer that over into how he has analyzed businesses and how he has had a lot of stick-with-itness in his own business model. So the entire world can be saying one thing, but he's already, because of just the character traits that appear in being frugal and living modestly, he doesn't necessarily care about what other people are saying. He's analyzing businesses the way that he has seen to be profitable, and he's not letting outside grumblings or whatever the news is covering to sway his opinions one way or another. He looks at the numbers, he analyzes them appropriately, he finds businesses that he believes are undervalued or not receiving the appropriate amount of coverage, um, or like positive PR, and he buys those despite no one else really seeing that they're a good value. And I think um, his ability to do that is far more noteworthy, far more respectable, and far more difficult than his unwillingness to move from one of the first homes that he purchased, or any type of being frugal in that. All that to say, Warren Buffett is one of the people I look up to most. So I agree with everything beneficial that Warren Buffett could possibly say. Um, and Snowball is a really good book. Yep. How to start getting into private lending. What do you recommend in regards to finding individuals that are looking into private loans? I think that's a really good question. And I think anybody that wants to be a lender that has autonomy with their money can do so. I think what I would look at is I would get really clear on promissory notes and how to secure those promissory notes with mortgages, how to record those appropriately. I would say that would take probably a day to 2 days to really nail down and get comfortable with. And then to your point, I would say that the individual is the most difficult part at that point. If you are lending in a manner that's pretty aggressive, where you make sure that you're over collateralized, right? So you make sure that if you're going to lend 100 grand, you want to have that money be secured by 125, 150, $200,000 worth of property, then the individual might matter a little bit less, because in the event that he defaults, you still get an asset that's worth more than your principal loan. So, and if you analyze your properties very aggressively like that, then it makes sense to not emphasize the individual as much. However, if you have thinner margins on your loan to values, then the individual matters more. If you want to, get passive income from interest income based on the promissory note and mortgage, more than you want to spend time analyzing deals, then yeah, private lending and the individual matter most. To all of our private lenders that we have met, a lot of them have been, friends, family members, people that we met that we have strong relationships with. And we kind of showed them the ropes of, and kind of, sort of taught them on how to be, private lenders, what promissory notes are, these mortgages, and then the title companies really, really work it out well, and making sure that everything is done appropriately. We've spoken with a lot of different people's attorneys, making sure that the promissory note hits their legal counsel's requirements as well. So I would say if you have an understanding of lending based on promissory notes, first position mortgages, if you have a understanding of how to analyze, how to calculate the after repair values of properties, how to calculate comp reports to figure out how much that asset is worth. And then if you have the ability to go out and network with people that are of very high ethical standing and always are interested in doing the right thing, then I think you have a lot of really good people that you can lend to, create that passive income for yourself, and in turn help the people that are borrowing the money amass a decent amount of wealth as well. I think private lending is probably one of those things that everybody should get back to doing. I would say that one of the things that I'm most frustrated with from a national financial thing is that so many people entrust their life savings to Wall Street via 401ks and these financial instruments that the employers just kind of put in front of people, right? If you take even the smallest amount of personal ownership over your financial situation, you would be able to increase your financial position and potentially retire significantly sooner uh, by incorporating private lending into your portfolio of investments, or just taking positive ownership of that as well, rather than riding the waves of the ups and downs of the stock market. If you uh, did a decent amount of trial and error and some personal ownership, and going down this line of questioning that you just had, I think it's a fantastic thing. I think it's life changing for a significant number of people very quickly. I think the number of people that have $250,000 in an account somewhere that have the ability to happily live off $30,000 to $40,000 a year, they could immediately lend that $250,000 for 10 to 12%, and now get 25 to 30 grand a year. That's interest. Their lump sum is staying there. They're not sacrificing or losing that. They're getting that interest income, and that immediately unhinges them from needing to work or looking at their 250,000 saying, man, if I consume $25,000 a year, I've only got 10 years of funds set away, right? I would disagree with, I don't know. I think at some point there was a sharp decline in the financial education, or the financial responsibility that a lot of people took. I think for those years where working for a large company for 30 years, trusting in their pension, I think that wrecked a lot of pretty basic long-term financial planning. So, well, I think yesterday I had a closing, which I normally don't do closings not on Friday, and I completely forgot about it. And I think the same thing has happened today. So I think I need to get to PC Title to do some closings. If you are in Montgomery County, PC Title is 100% the title company that you should use to close all of your real estate transactions. All right. Well, hey, it's been fantastic. I really appreciate all the questions that have come across today. I think these were fantastic, phenomenal, great questions. And next Friday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'll be right here to come up with any or answer any questions that you come up with between now and then. So in the meantime, be sure to read a decent number of books by billionaires. I think Howard Marks, What's the Most Important Thing, is the name of the book. I think that's a fantastic read that you should read right now, especially if you are concerned about the market. And then watching interviews with people like Sam Zell, Howard Marks, Warren Buffett, I think that will give you a lot of peace of mind. Also, check out Donald Bren and listen to a couple of the interviews that he's done. He's got some really solid opinions as it comes to real estate investing. All right. I will talk to you all soon.